Tonight, we're going to focus a little bit more on Arizona actions. We've learned a lot in the last couple of years about how important local politics is. This is where we have our strongest voice, and where some of those same issues that we're dealing with at the national level are also happening at the local level, especially with voting rights and with education, as many of us know. So, next slide. We're going to talk about request to speak, and I'm going to turn this over. You can go ahead and connect your computer, Sharon. Sharon Kirsch is going to come up. She is with a couple of organizations. One is called Civic Engagement Beyond Voting, and they have lots of fabulous resources. She'll talk a little bit more. She's also one of the founders of Save Our Schools that we help support and help to help defeat Prop 305. So come on up and welcome Sharon.
Hi everybody, I feel like I just sort of drop in on DesertProgressives from time to time, so thank you for having me back again. So tonight I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Request to Speak system. How many of you are already signed up to use it? Okay, so keep your hands up. How many of you have actually used it? Yeah. Okay, so here's what we're finding. Actually, it's a little bit complicated to sign up, but it's a little more complicated to actually use it. And so my goal tonight is to get everybody signed up and to give everybody a good, strong sense of how to use it and what resources are available to you if you get confused. So if you can go to the next slide. So not every state, actually most states don't have something like this. Right, so in Arizona, we can weigh in on bills moving through the legislature from our home. So it's called Request to Speak because back in the day, and you can still do this now, but you had to drive down to the Capitol, fill out a little piece of paper, and then you could go talk in front of the committee. And you can still do that, but you can also just stay at home and weigh in on any bill that you want to. So next slide, please. So we call it, you can just be an armchair activist. And I call it a kind of gateway drug to more serious politics. Because it's a really great way, in a sort of safe space of your home and in your pajamas, to just start to get a better sense of how the legislative process in Arizona works. And it's complicated. So it's good to be able to use this system. So this is as simple as it is. If I were just giving the 5-minute presentation, I would show you this. You put a bill number in that you're interested in, and then you say, yes, I'm for it. You click there, or no, I'm against it. Not very often would we be neutral. Sometimes organizations, like Save Our Schools, is weighing in neutral on some bills. And then it says, do you wish to speak, yes, no, or if necessary. So you can just say, yes, I'm for this, no, I don't want to speak, submit, and you're done. And it's that simple. Now, if you want to, and if it's something that you care about, you can put a comment in this box, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So I've said this, I think it's an online tool, allows you to register your support or opposition for a bill. You don't have to actually speak. Most of you probably already know what legislative district you live in, but many, many people do not. Even if they vote, they go and they vote, but they don't necessarily know, oh, I live in LD 28 or I live in LD 20. So if you don't know, or if you know people who don't know, ask them, send them to azredistricting.org, district locator. You can just Google district locator. There are other ways to do this, but I find this one easier. And then you can find out who your 2 state representatives are and who your 1 state senator is. So if you haven't had a chance to check out the Arizona State Legislature website, this is it. And on your tables, you'll find a green handout. And so I think the website is on there. It's azledge.gov. And if you do nothing else, please just spend 5 or 10 minutes in poking around on this website because it is just a great resource. So you can see the little tabs across the top here. You can click on Senate, everything you've always wanted to know about our Senate, who your senators are, what committees they're on, how they voted, everything is under that tab. Same for the House. Information about the Legislative Council, the Joint Legislative Budget Committee. They do all of the financial stuff for the legislatures and the bills that make their way through. Here's a thing for bills, so if you're interested in finding out more information about a bill, it's all under there, and so on. This is also where you access Request to Speak. And so you see these little, right here it says Request to Speak going up the side there. So you can either click on that, or you can click on legislative information, which will take you into the Request to Speak system. This is also on your handout, and if you go to the Civic Engagement Beyond Voting website, cebv.us, that's the website, and everything I'm telling you tonight is available there. There's a video about this that moves very fast, but we put captions on it, so you can watch it quickly through once, and then you can kind of go through it again and stop it and look closely at the screen. So there's that. This presentation is available on the CEB website. This handout is on there, and all kinds of other resources. So I won't go through this in too much detail, but it's a handy guide to know a little bit about if you're going to use Request to Speak. Because the time you can use Request to Speak is when the bill is actually being heard in the committee. And so you see that a couple different points here. It says you can comment with RTS. Bills being heard in committee, the committee begins and then RTS closes. We have a legislative weekly that comes out on Sundays, and it'll kind of walk through all the bills that are going to be heard in committee that week and tell you what times they're being heard so you know when you need to sign in. And so as it moves through the Senate, moves through the House, you have multiple options, multiple times that you can sign in and weigh in on a bill. And you can look through in more detail. We added this, I know it's small print, but what happens at the end of the legislative session, our legislature is in the midst of shenanigans all the time, but it gets especially crazy at the end of the legislative session. And they do all these fast tracking and striker bills, so they'll take one bill that was about something else and strike everything out and stick something else in and try to sneak it through. It gets crazy, crazy at the end of the session. So just to kind of put that on your radar. So in order to sign up for the Request to Speak system, you have to be signed in by a person, could be you, could be someone from Civic Engagement Beyond Voting, at the Capitol, at a kiosk at the Capitol, just one time to get you into the system. So I saw one of the forms back there is about RTS that Judy has on those tables. So if you're interested or if you haven't signed up and you'd like to get signed up, put your name and your email on that form. Write your email so I can actually read it. People write quickly and I don't get your emails right sometimes. And we will get you into the system, and once you're in, you'll get an email with instructions for what comes next. Now what comes next is you have to sign in for the first time. You don't have to create an account because someone will do that for you, but you have to sign into your account. And then if you do it from the same computer, you're just signed in. When you go to get back on, you're just in. So mostly you don't have to do that step more than once. And this is one of the pages that you'll come to. This is the main layout of the page. You've got this black bar on the left that tells you where you can go and gives you options. And then this arrow right here, that's my name, Sharon Kirsch. So that tells me I'm in. I'm signed into the system. You can do the next slide, Judy. So the first time you sign in, it's a really, really good idea to identify yourself as a registered voter. What happens when a bill is being heard in committee is the legislators are looking through your comments, looking to see how many people have weighed in for or against, and they can tell if you are a registered voter or not. So even if you signed in last year or you had, you've had an RTS account for quite a while, just go in to update personal information and double check that you are in fact identified as a registered voter. Last year, people were getting kicked out. I don't know if that's going to happen this year, but for some reason, that little piece of information was getting bounced out of people's files. So just go in and double check. You put in your date of birth and then one other piece of information, and it'll verify you, and then it'll show you as a registered voter in the system. So the system has kind of two arms. It has the request to speak side, and it has the bill status inquiry side. So I think of the request to speak side as kind of like the elementary side, and the bill status inquiry is sort of high school or maybe even graduate school. It gets kind of complicated in the bill status inquiry, but it's a great resource. So if you have the patience, it's something that's worth knowing. You can go to the next slide. So if you want to just do the request to speak, you have a bill you're really interested in, you want to weigh in, you love it, you want to make sure your legislators know, you go, you sign in, and then you click right here, new request. And then you can search the bill number. You don't have to say if it's a Senate bill or a House bill. The bills have SB whatever, 1070, SB 1431, which is a voucher bill. You just have to put a number in, or you can search by a keyword. And I think that's on the next slide, Judy, if you jump up. Yeah, so you can search by a keyword, or if you know it's in a certain committee, you can just search Education Committee and see what all will come up for that. And then if you go to the next slide, it will bring up this. And you can say, yes, I'm for it. No, I don't want to speak. Submit, and you're done. Now, if you do want to make a comment, and it's helpful to make comments because they do read them. And sometimes legislators will say, I have all these people weighing in on RTS saying this bill hurts their families because. And so anything you write in here, you have to think of it as very public, right? So you're not going to go off in all caps here and drop F-bombs, right? Not the place for that. So, but you want to be clear about why you feel passionate about this bill, either for or against it. If it's something that affects you or your family personally, say that. Tell them that. But you don't have to do that, because sometimes that's the spot that people get. They're like, oh, I want to say something, but I don't know what to say. You don't have to. You can just click, yes, I'm for this. No, I'm not going to speak, submit, and be done. You can go back at a later time and add comments if you would like. Okay, so now if you get brave and you decide you want to go to the bill status inquiry side, I'll walk you through that. I know I'm throwing a bunch of information at you, so don't even try to hold it in your brain. Just know that these resources are available for you on the Civic Engagement Beyond Voting website, cebv.us. But you see here on the left-hand side in that black column, we've got two options, request to speak or bill status inquiry, so you can click on that. And it takes you into this side of the online tool. And so right here, I've looked up one certain bill. And about that one bill, I can find all this information. So it gives me an overview. It tells me when it's been assigned, what committee it's going to, where it is in the process. Here's bill status. Every time a bill is heard in committee, there are cameras recording the whole thing. And so if you want to, you can go look up the videos and see how people have testified on certain bills. And it's a little bit addicting, so you might not want to do that. Sponsors, keywords, if you want to know who sponsored the bill, and then RTS, current bill positions. I'll show you what that page looks like in a minute. And then the last tab is documents. And under that documents tab, if you want to actually read the whole bill, you can do that there. Now, if you look up here, this is another box where you can put comments. It says personal bill comments. So that means it's just you. Nobody sees it. You can go off in all caps here and say whatever you want. It's just for you. And so sometimes what I do when I'm in a hurry and I can't quite get my thoughts together to add my comments, but I know it's a bill I'm going to be following, I'll just jot some notes there to myself. So that when I go back, I've got a place to start. Think, oh yeah, I wanted to say this, or I wanted to say that. So it's a place where you can put that kind of information. Or if somebody else made a comment or said something about it, you can put that information there. And then next slide. So here's an example of RTS current bill position. So this is a bill, this was about clean elections from a couple of years ago. The only people for it, one person from the East Valley Chamber, representing the East Valley Chamber of Commerce Alliance. And this page just went on and on. All these people were against it. They're saying, do not mess with our clean elections, right? And this was in 2017 when Civic Engagement Beyond Voting, which I was involved with before Save Our Schools, we were just panicking. We're like, oh my God, we have to do something. We signed up 1,300 people to use Request to Speak in 6 weeks. And it makes a difference. It's a great way to have a voice in this process. Because the other thing legislators do is they say, look at this, no one supports this bill, except for the East Valley Chamber Alliance. That's it, right? So that gives them some persuasive tactics they can use when the bill's being discussed. Okay, so the other thing that bill status inquiry lets you do is track certain bills. And you know there are hundreds and hundreds of bills. So if there are certain ones that you want to keep track of, you can set up lists for yourself. It's called personal progress. It's right here, personal progress in that bar. So you can click on personal progress. You can create a list, and if you go to the next slide, I think it will show, yeah, so here, of course, I have an education list. So here, and I titled it that. You can title it whatever you want. And then you can, and here you can add another list, so if you're interested in healthcare, environment, whatever, you can have as many lists as you want. And then you'll get alerts about your bills that you put in those lists. And so if it moves into a different committee, if it does anything, it's going to show up here. And it's just a great way to keep track of bills that you're interested in.
Sharon, is that done by email? Are you alerted by email?
How
are you alerted?
You know, I thought you were alerted by email, but somebody said no, so I should check before I tell you.
Okay.
You may have to sign into the system to see, like, here I have 6. But I'll double check and let you know. Yeah. Okay, next slide. So here's one of my lists right here. There's that evil 1431 that we all said no to when we voted down Prop 305. Thank you all. And so these are my 2 lists. I was following women's health care bills and education bills. And there, see this little green tab right here? That shows you where you are in all of these things. So if you ever get lost, you can just sort of look for that. Okay, next page. So I also think it's really, really important not just to do RTS, but to also follow up with emails and calls. Now, it has been the case for me very often that I email my legislators and I get emails back from them. Sometimes they're, here in committee and email me back within 5 minutes or something. So if you're not regularly emailing and calling, I really, really strongly encourage you to do that, especially those of you who are in LD20 and have Rick Gray. He's emailing people back. You need to make sure he knows how you feel about public education, because he does not support public education as much as we want him to. So it's important to send emails and to make calls. However, they don't always read all your emails and they don't always respond. So make sure in your subject line you are just short and sweet, right? No on SB 1174. So if they're sitting in committee and all they do is just glance down the subject line of their email and they see 10 no on 1174, no, right? So that alone can be persuasive. You're telling them, we're watching, we have opinions, I've gone to the trouble to email you and tell you how I feel. And if you are a constituent, make sure they know that you're their constituent. Okay, so I think, Judy, you're planning on talking about this a little bit more. But the real question in all of this is, how the heck do we keep track of all these bills? What do we do? So another member of Civic Engagement Beyond Voting, who's also in Save Our Schools, is Melinda Merkel-Iyer. And she spends probably more than full time doing all this work for us. She tracks these bills, she reads them, she reads what other organizations have to say about, across the political spectrum, have to say about them. She aggregates all that information, and she puts it together in the Arizona Legislative Weekly Update. And what I really like about this is she will make recommendations for how to vote, usually in line with progressive politics, but not always. But what she will always do is put in links so that you have all kinds of information at your fingertips. All you have to do is click, and you can go dig deeper and figure out where you personally stand on the topic. And so it's just such a helpful resource for that. So if you go to the next page, the other thing she does that I really, really like is she says, if you have 10 minutes, do this. If you have 20 minutes, do this. If you have 30 minutes, do this. And so it helps you kind of plan your time. So this is a plug. We're putting my Save Our Schools hat on now. Save Our Schools also, we're actually going to change the title. We realized after we sent it out to everybody that that's a bad title. We're going to call it the Arizona Legislative Education Weekly or something like that. So of course Save Our Schools is focusing just on particular education related bills. So if you're interested in education and you don't receive Save Our Schools email, please make sure you sign up and you'll get this weekly. And it does a similar thing like the Melinda's Legislative Weekly does. It identifies particular bills, talks about where they are in the process, and whether or not Save Our Schools supports, opposes, or will remain neutral on this. And watch what we do because we're doing some interesting things. So. This is also on your the handout on the table, different ways to get involved. It has the CEBV website right there, more information about requests to speak. The other thing we're doing this year, new from last year, is we're having office hours all over the state on Sunday afternoons and Monday mornings. So if you want to sit down with someone and go through this process, it can be super helpful to do that. So I'm going to be in downtown Phoenix on Monday mornings. I usually do Monday mornings. A lot of people are doing these on Sunday afternoons, just going to a coffee shop and just saying, I'm going to be here every Sunday from this time to this time. I'm going to be at my place every Monday morning from 7:45 to 9:30. Most committees start at 10. And so get a cup of coffee, sit down, we'll just walk through it together. And sometimes I think that's the best way to really get a handle on it. So the Civic Engagement Beyond Voting Facebook page lists all of the different locations for where these are happening. And if for some reason you have trouble finding that or you're not on Facebook, you can always email me and I'll help you find one that's close to you. You can go the next. Okay, that's it. I hope I didn't talk too fast. I wanted to leave time for questions. The other last thing I'll say is we also want more trainers, right? So we're trying to get, and we're signing up hundreds of people every week. So if you're if you're in a book club or whatever, like if you're interested in training, we have all kinds of materials for people to do that. So if you're interested in that, let me know. So questions?
Okay. Well, I'm just going to mention something while I'm looking at computers here.
Okay.
We have a point person
Okay.
here with DesertProgressives. Her name is Sharon Kirsch right here.
Yeah.
And she has agreed to kind of be the co-chair of our request to speak
Excellent.
legislative team. And so she is the person to email, to talk to. She will help walk people through their
Nice.
experience with using request to speak. She'll help people know what your office hours are, the closest one.
I'm not surprised. DesertProgressives is always totally on top of things. So yeah, that's awesome. That's great. Yeah.
Is there a legislative minimum time between when the bill is scheduled for committee and when the committee meets?
So the question is there a minimum amount of time between when a bill is scheduled and when the committee actually meets? In theory, yes. In practice, things get moved around all the time. So the other thing I should mention about Melinda's Legislative Weekly is it's a Google Doc. It's a live Google Doc. So don't just print it, or actually sometimes I print it when I'm sitting down to do my RTS. But she updates it in real time and will highlight things that have changed from when she first put it out on Sunday. So for example, if the bill was scheduled and that gets changed, or sometimes they sneak them in and suddenly it's being heard and we didn't know about it, she puts that in. We'll send out alerts on Twitter and Facebook and stuff like that. So.
Was your organization the one that did the civics and a slice presentation? Or
No,
Okay.
not that I'm aware. Yeah.
Do you have anything to organize people around specific topics or issues if you wanted to do a blast? Like, is there a text bank I could join or some distribution list I could pay attention to?
So Civic Engagement Beyond Voting has its own list that sends out the Legislative Weekly. The Legislative Weekly doesn't cover all bills, but it does many, many bills that are especially of interest to progressive community. So you could use that and send it out to your own list. And of course, Save Our Schools does education list related stuff. So
The other thing, I'll just jump in
Yeah.
on this too. we're asking people to sign up for these issue teams over here on these sheets. And that means that we're actually kind of trying to create our own internal lists of people who are going to be experts, or if not experts, they're going to really follow voting rights, for example, and what's happening in the Arizona legislature around that. Or they're going to really follow the environment, or whatever the issue is that's back there. And then the role of the people on that team will be to distribute that information to to the rest of us, really, on Facebook, and maybe they'll develop some additional tools, some texting tools for getting a hold of everybody, saying, right now, stop everything, and go to request to speak, and, say something about this bill.
You all probably know that Indivisible National selected Arizona as one of the states to focus on. And that's in part because of all the work you guys did, because Desert Progressives has been so on top of things, and indivisible groups across the state. It's just been amazing to see it. And so I know that Indivisible in particular, national, and in Arizona is focusing on voting rights as well. Yeah. Was there, yeah.
I just wanted to clarify, excuse me, one thing. You said you can do a request to speak the morning that it's going to committee?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's open up until the point the committee starts, and then it shuts down.
Okay, great.
So then they have their committee discussion, and if it goes on through the process and into another committee, request to speak will open again.
Okay.
Yeah, and you actually have to go in again.
Okay.
So whatever you said first time doesn't follow you. Same when it goes from House to Senate. So.
Thank you.
So as long as it's still open on the website, then it's available.
Yes. Yeah, if you go in and put in a bill number and it doesn't come up, then you just don't have access to it right then. Yeah.
But go back and check again.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, thank you. Oh, sure.
Create a phone blast to call a particular senator over a particular bill.
Yes.
Do you feel as though that it would be more valuable to do that phone blast to that senator's office, or should it be more valuable to do a request to speak? You said do both.
Yeah, so I mean, I think if
you
you...
pay attention to request to speak as much as they do to the phone calls to their own office.
Yeah, I think phone calls are really important.
Okay.
Really important. So, yeah, I mean, if we had to hierarchize thing, I would put phone calls above RTS. I would. But I think really what we want to do is we want to create optics that show that we are watching, we are paying attention. So if you get both, a whole bunch signing in on request to speak and 10 people calling in the course of 2 hours, like that's good. We just want to keep sending that message. The ground has shifted in Arizona, we are paying attention, and you're not going to get away with all the stuff anymore.
If you, let's say you put in a request to speak, and you also make a phone call,
Yeah.
do they match up the names and say, this person has contacted me 3 times on the same issue?
I suppose if they
and you lose the
really
contact?
wanted to, they could.
Pardon me?
I suppose if they really wanted to, they could. They could look to see if you also weighed in on request to speak. Yeah.
Because I've been wondering about that with the Congress too, because you can call in, you can do the text
Yeah.
thing, and you can also write
Yeah.
letters.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that
Well, and with our state legislators, it's of course their aides, their secretaries who answer the phone. So some of us are on first name basis with some of those people, right? They field a lot of calls. So, of course we're kind, but clear about what our position is. But I think that's important. So if you are one of those people who calls a lot, you just say, hey, it's Sharon calling again. I just want to make sure you let Senator so-and-so know this is where I still stand on this issue. Yeah, but I think that's good. We want them to know we're watching. It's a new day here.
And one thing that Melinda recently said at a workshop I attended was, if a legislator gets 10 phone calls in a day, they consider that the phone is ringing off the
Yeah,
hook.
for the state legislature. Yeah.
So we can easily make an impact. If you're making a call and I'm making a call and Ellen's making a call and Michael's making a call.
It's really
they're
true.
like, whoa, people are really worried about this. So
Yeah.
it makes a difference when
Yeah.
you call.
That's why it's handy to work with a group.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, here we are.
Does that text the 507-09, whatever, that send faxes to the offices.
Yeah, that's
Is
ResistBot.
that ResistBot?
yeah.
Is that still operating? And
I think
is
that's
it-
just
is
a
it-
federal.
It's a federal.
Actually, they just added. you
To
can
state.
contact state as well.
Okay.
So actually,
Come and talk to me at my table.
yeah, we're gonna have 3 different tables where you can get more details about everything that we're talking about right now. So, kind of a one-on-one basis,
Still going on.
get some hand holding.
So I hope everybody will sign up. I hope everybody will follow through and use it. It's a great resource with Sharon. So thank you all very much.